My name is Alf Hurst and I'm going to be chairing this session today. I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you. If this is your first time coming into these sessions, an extra special welcome. So my first duty is to hand over to the President of the Spiritualist National Union, Minister David Bruton, who will introduce the session and his guests. David.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and I trust you've all had an enjoyable Christmas, albeit perhaps a quiet one. The subject for tonight, as you are all, I'm sure, very well aware, is a subject that I think has challenged spiritualist thinking for many, many years. The subject, of course, is reincarnation. Tonight, to be able to discuss this subject and to debate this subject, I have three friends, three people who in their own right have a considerable amount of knowledge within the union, and I'd like to invite them or welcome them and introduce them to you. So first of all, I would like to introduce Minister Jackie Wright, who is the Vice President of the Spiritualist National Union. Jackie is a course organizer and tutor at the Arthur Findlay College, but she also works internationally, teaching and demonstrating her passion for her religion of spiritualism. So ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome Jackie, and thank you, Jackie, for joining us this evening.
My pleasure.
Our next guest is Minister Stephen Upton, who is the Director responsible for the education and exponents on the NEC. He too is also a course organizer and tutor at the Arthur Findlay College, and Stephen equally works internationally, teaching and demonstrating his amazing ability as one of our foremost healing mediums in spiritualism. Welcome, Stephen, and thank you for joining us.
Good evening. Thank you, David.
Thank you. And my third guest this evening is a gentleman that, if you've been involved with spiritualism for a while, you've possibly had some contact with through his official role. I welcome Charles Colston, who was the General Secretary of the Spiritualist National Union, the longest serving General Secretary in the history of the Union. But if you only look at Charles as an administrator, take it from me, you are missing an incredible amount. For Charles has been a spiritualist for many, many years, and his encyclopedic knowledge of spiritualism and the union make him a very, very good speaker on a range of many subjects. So it's a great pleasure to welcome Charles Colston, and thank you for joining us, Charles. You're muted, Charles. You won't be the first. Hi, Charles. That's wonderful. Thank you and welcome.
Very much.
So, ladies and gentlemen, reincarnation. As spiritualists, we know that life is eternal. We know that that change called death is but a stepping point from one sphere of existence to the other. We know that people live on in the spiritual world, but perhaps what we are less sure about is what is life like when we pass to the spirit world. Many religions, particularly Eastern, teach the concept of reincarnation, that cycle of life continuing to go round and round and round, and us coming back into this world many times. From spiritualists I've spoken to, there tends to be two camps, well, maybe three. One, people who believe ardently in reincarnation and accept it. Conversely, there are people that have no acceptance of it whatsoever, and believe that when you have finished your time in this world, you move on, passing ultimately into a greater harmony with that power we call God. And the need to return to this world is something that is not on the agenda. And then also we have a third group. And speaking personally, I am in that third group where I am waiting, I suppose, for to be convinced of one aspect or the other. I'm sure, like many of you, I've read some really convincing and thought-provoking accounts that have been written recently and over the years about people claiming to be able to prove reincarnation. So that's where I stand now in the third group. And I'm sure you will all have your own group that you'll particularly feel drawn to. And I hope tonight we are going to hear people's experiences that maybe they can explain what convinces them one way or the other. But I'd like now to start with our panel. And I'm going to start first with Charles and ask Charles. I'm not going to put you on the spot, Charles, but just perhaps talk to us for a few moments about your understanding of reincarnation and maybe evidence that you've received over the years.
Thanks, David. I think at the start, we need to define what's meant by reincarnation. The problem I find is that this concept varies according to the culture and the religion in which you were brought up in the various countries in this plane of being. There are certain systems of reincarnation which spiritualists would in no way find acceptable. And I think it might be useful to get rid of those right at the start. Take, for example, Buddhist reincarnation. Now, they believe that when a life is finished, the new life starts instantaneously upon the expiry of the old one. They liken a life to a lit oil lamp. And as you go through your life, the oil in the lamp goes down. And as you approach the end of your life, the oil starts to run out. But it never runs out completely. They teach, using this metaphor, that the last drops of the oil lamp representing your current life will be used to kindle the flame of the new oil lamp, i.e. the life you are going into. I would say that that is totally unacceptable to spiritualists, because we spiritualists believe that when you have come to the end of your life, whether it be a single one or multiple, you pass into a non-physical state of being. So for that reason alone, I dismiss Buddhist reincarnation. Now, the Hindu view of reincarnation is a bit similar, but they accept an intermediate state. The problem I find with Hindu reincarnation is that they believe that a person who has lived as a human being in one life can, in the next life, revert to life in a lower order or species, for instance, an animal. You all know the concept of cows being sacred. A Hindu will not kill a cow because that cow could have been his grandmother in a previous life. Again, spiritualists would not find a teaching like that acceptable, simply because our seventh principle says eternal progress open to every human soul. There is no progression in going back to a lower order of life. That would be retrogression. And none of our spirit guides, those who teach reincarnation, teach that sort of concept. In fact, they tell us that human evolution and animal evolution are two separate lines of progress, which never meet or cross over with each other. So what are we in fact talking about when it comes to reincarnation? I'm talking about the concept as it's been put forward by the vast majority of spirit guides who have been at the forefront of our movement over the last 150 years. One of the best loved and well-known guides was, of course, Silver Birch. And I've got an extract here where he explains with a metaphor what reincarnation is about. He says, if you visualize man as an individual who in his earthly life is like an iceberg in which you have one small portion manifesting and the larger portion not manifesting, then that's the end of one incarnation. In a successive incarnation, a portion of the submerged self will come into the world of matter. So you will have two different personalities, but still only one individual. And in spirit life, as progression takes place, it is part of the submerged self that comes to the surface all the time. And basically, that sort of concept, that view of reincarnation, is what is propagated by the majority of spirit guides that we are familiar with. Basically, what they're saying is that you and I are only a fragment, a portion of the real you, which is a more splendid and higher conscious being, which resides in spirit. Each of us has a higher self, and that higher self is in control of all the aspects which it chooses from time to time to incarnate into the world of matter. So the concept is that as a person lives his life and comes to the end of it, all the experiences he has gone through, all the challenges he has been faced with and dealt with, all the emotional ups and downs which he has gone through, all the ways in which he has tried to deal with his problems, all those are fed back to the higher self. And that helps the evolution of the total conscious being, which each of us is. So when I talk about a person being reincarnated, it's not really right to talk about the reincarnation of the fragment. I am Charles Colston for this particular incarnation. But it is not me who will reincarnate. What will happen is that my experiences, the upshot of my life, all the things I've learned and dealt with, all those are fed back. And it is the higher self that puts out another fragment, another shoot, which comes into matter. Many of the things, my memories and associations in my life will be carried over to that newly incarnated fragment, because it's all part of a single unitary consciousness, which acts as a sort of central reservoir of knowledge, which all the fragments which it will eventually put out into matter, which they can all tap into. Right, having cleared what in my mind is the basis we're talking about and nothing else, I am not someone who believes that reincarnation is proved. We could talk for hours, and there are many hundreds, thousands of books giving very weighty evidence in favor of reincarnation of the sort I'm talking about. But even Silver Birch says you will never be able to prove reincarnation. He said you can always explain it away as being spirit control, ancestral memory, tapping into cosmic consciousness, even the mind fantasizing, that sort of thing, spirit possession. You'll never be able to prove it. The most you can do is build up a body of knowledge which is suggestive of reincarnation being true. So if I believe it can't be proved, what is it that makes me accept it? there are many things, and I'm not talking about the evidence. I've laid the evidence to one side. It's weighty, but it is evidence only, not proof. The two things which force me, if you like, to accept reincarnation are, number one, the sheer preponderance of spirit guides who teach this. I have a mini library at home of the teachings of guides. And I remember one day I was about to do a lecture on reincarnation, and I thought it'd be interesting to do a mini survey of all the books I've got. So what I did was I totted up all the books I had with guides teachings which taught reincarnation, and those which did not regard it as a fact. I can't remember the exact figures, but it was something like I had teachings from roughly 105 different spirit guides. Of those 105, approximately 97 taught reincarnation. Only a handful, and I mean a handful, taught that reincarnation was not a fact. I won't mention individual guides' names, but for me, the fact that spirit guides were almost unanimous in believing this made me think twice about having the temerity to believe that they were all deluded. And what about those guides which didn't teach it? Silver Birch had a comment about that. He said, there are some in my world who do not accept it because they have not reached the point of consciousness at which they know that it is a fact, but they will in course of time.
Charles, at that point, can I bring Jackie in? Would you mind? Because
Not at all, of course.
I just want to allow the other speakers to get their point in, and then we can open up and we can invite people to ask.
Yes, absolutely. I've gone on quite a bit, haven't I?
That's all right, Charles. You're doing wonderfully. That's fine. So, Jackie, give us your view. What's your view on the subject?
Well, that was really wonderful listening to Charles, and he had me there listening to his words and his thoughts, because this is a conversation that keeps coming back and coming back and coming back. And we hear it from wherever we go. It's always, do you believe in reincarnation? If I was being asked this subject 3 years ago, my reply would be no, absolutely not. And I was just saying to the panel before we aired, I was nearly, well, there was quite a heated debate in Germany at one time when I said I didn't believe in it. Because there is for me, whenever I've heard about reincarnation, it has been from the Buddhist or the Hindu, the Eastern philosophies. And it has always been this karmic reoccurrence where you come back because you have a duty to the life you've already lived. So you've been a bad person this life, you have to come back and readdress that balance. But I'm certainly on the fence now. I'm neither for it nor against it. What changed that? Well, about 3 years ago, I did a lecture in Holland on reincarnation. And I talked about why I didn't believe in it, why I thought it was a load of rubbish. And it was all a figment of our imagination. And a lot of it was retained memory from this life, not from past lives. On the evening, I did a trance demonstration where my guide spoke about why reincarnation is a fact, why it does happen, how it is a choice, not something that is compulsory, and why it isn't something that we choose to do to readdress a balance of a bad life or a good life. It is something where our soul says we still have something to offer the world, so we will go back in a lifetime to fulfill that. That's not verbatim, I'm saying that, that's just me trying to paraphrase it. But so that sat me on the fence then, because how can I ignore the words of my guides? But what I have said is I want my own evidence of it. So that came about when a friend of mine who was a regressionist was training, and she asked my son, who most of you know is a school teacher, would he be willing to be regressed? He was. He was regressed to being a young boy in the Holocaust. He gave a lot of great details. he come back and what he said was, well, you know, my specialist subject, my degree is in the Second World War and in the Holocaust. So was he bringing back a past life or a memory of a past life, or was it retained memory from learned behavior? Did he choose to study the Holocaust because of a past life? Which one was it? So what was first, you know? So I'm most certainly on the fence, and I'm open to be convinced or not about it. But my guides are certainly in the camp that says reincarnation does happen, but it is a choice. It is not compulsory. And that's where I'm at the minute.
Thank you, Jackie. Stephen, let's bring you in. What's your point of view?
Thank you, David. Out of your three categories that you announced at the beginning, David, I fit into a fourth category. Firstly, I regard myself as a one-lifist. I believe we have one life, and as our soul progresses and evolves, we eventually move on to the next stage of life, which is continual refining from the physical through to the spiritual world, and beyond that, continually refining on a journey back towards our Creator, God. However, believing that as a one-lifist, I do not exclude, in my belief, the belief that some souls do come back, some souls who have lived here, come back on very specific missions, because it helps you understand certain dilemmas in life. And I'll give you an example. I was doing healing sittings in Denmark a number of years ago, and in one day I remember two patients very clearly. Both had cancer, both were diagnosed as terminal. One was, I think she was in the mid-80s, and the other was 2 years old. Over the course of the next 2 or 3 weeks, one passed to spirit and one was diagnosed later on as no longer having cancer. Clearly, I can't claim that we cured cancer, we don't know. But there was a spontaneous remission, is probably the technical term. If you had a choice in this matter, you think, well, somebody who was 86 has lived a life, a 2-year-old's had no life. It would be relatively easy if you had the power to choose as to which you would choose that would survive, which would pass on. But it was the 86-year-old that had the remission. The 2-year-old passed, and it troubled me for a very long time. About 4 years later, I met the father of the child again, and it was still bothering me, and I talked to him about it. And he told me that I was trying to find purpose in coming into this world for 2 years and going, and out of those 2 years, 18 months of suffering. And the father told me that his son's life had brought him closer to God. So therefore there was purpose. But also he'd calculated that in the 18 months from being diagnosed to passing, he'd calculated that 84 people had had opportunity to try to help. Doctors, nurses, specialists, people like myself as healing mediums, and some charlatans, unfortunately. One person sold him a tea bag for £100, claiming it would cure cancer. So that child's life created opportunity in this world for 84 of us to either rise to the best of human nature to try and genuinely help, or to succumb to the worst of human nature and try to scam the family. And some did, more than a few, unfortunately. As a consequence of that, it helped me understand then, why is it that some children, some souls come into this world for a very short but very difficult time. And I can accept that they are souls that in the sense of reincarnation have reincarnated for their own, not for their own purpose or benefit directly, but for ours. So I can accept Charles's explanation. What I don't accept is that every one of us comes back over and over again, time after time. I adhere to the teachings of Andrew Jackson Davis and Emma Hardinge Britton, in that we're on a pathway of evolution. But what troubles me about people that I've met who have a strong belief in reincarnation is they almost are trying to live or relive a so-called past life at the exclusion of living this one. And I have to confess, I don't have a great deal of interest in reincarnation. If I have or have not lived before, it doesn't really interest me. It's what I'm doing now to live this life now today and where I'm going that interests me. Am I fulfilling myself, my life right now, and trying to live life as a spiritualist here and now? Never mind what I may or may not have done. I can't change that, but I can change what I do tomorrow. And in talking to many people over the years who had a strong belief in it, besides they always seem to try and convince me I'm wrong and they're right, they don't seem to be particularly interested in living this life. They always seem to have been something far more important in a past life. And I just wonder very often if there's some kind of psychological need to have been important, that they don't see their current life as being important. Whereas every life is important. Doesn't matter what you are in life, doesn't matter about your profession or your job. Every soul in this world right now is important, and we're here for a purpose. And it's this life that's important, not the one we might have had or might not have had in the past. So I'm a one-lifist, but I don't exclude the possibility or the belief that some souls do come back. Thank you.
We have a huge audience, and I'm sure looking at some of the comments in the chat box, I'm sure we've got many people that would like to ask questions. 7:30 has come round very, very quickly. I think this is a session that could do with have been a little bit longer than an hour. We have half an hour left. So, ladies and gentlemen, the floor is open. If you please put up your blue hands and come forward and bring forward your question. We want to get through as many as we possibly can. So if you can try and make your questions succinct, and I'm going to invite the panel to respond accordingly. So who would like to come in and start asking a question? Oh, I've got yellow hands. Obviously, we've been updated. So first then, can we take Carolyn, please? Carolyn Hornblow. Alf, can you, if you'd like to unmute yourself, and Alf will bring you into the room.
Okay, I tried to unmute, I got muted.
Oh, go ahead, Caroline, you did it there. Just
Unmute me.
again. There you go.
Okay, hi. I've had a couple of experiences. I actually went to a past life regression, had 3 experiences. Nothing was glamorous. And I sort of thought I must be making it up. But the theme primarily was what past life did I have that is impacting me in this life? And one was my persistence in weight, one was my restlessness, and there was something else. And I thought, well, how did I come up with this imagery? Because it wasn't something I was thinking about. And the rationale I was given was, it's not your imagination, because it's something that you've experienced in a past life. The next experience I had was a 4-year-old turned to his mother. She was telling him off about something, and he said, it didn't used to be like this. He said, I used to be the one telling you off. And then the third example, which I think I'm about to forget. Oh yes, I met a chap who was convinced that he'd known me. And I said, well, yes, we've just met. No, he said, I knew you before. He said, you were actually part in World War II. We met in France. And this was a chap who was a professor of French in Glasgow, a perfectly sane, normal chap. But he was convinced that I had been killed when I was 42. And when I was born again, that would have been from 1942 to 1952, which brought me to the right age for him. Because if I added that 10 years to hit where he was when he met me or knew me, he was currently at that age, the correct age, if I'd still stayed alive. And I did go back to the French village that he said I was in, and it felt a bit strange, but then that could be ideas implanted in my head. So I tend to be very open to the idea of reincarnation, but yeah, that's my experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn. I'm going to take a few more comments, and then I'm going to open it to the panel. So Helena, would you like to come in, please?
Hi everyone. Oh, sorry, I just unmute myself. Hi everyone. I've got an interesting kind of concept. I agree with all you're saying, but mine slightly differs. As a kid, I used to get visited by Isis. Now, I've never considered myself anything to be a part like her, but I had lessons from her. Now, my understanding is I was once taken out. I wanted to see what it was like. I mean, I've had quite a few near-death experiences where your body spins around. I was taken out, brought down, and then because I was asking, where does your soul go when you die? Okay. The concept was I was taken out to the universe. I dispersed like a supernova, like stars, into the atmosphere, and I lingered there. Now, it was the thought of my children that pulled me back to the body. Now, when I was actually exploring that thought, I had I'm sure you understand the prism of the soul, that within the aura, we're all energy, that we've got a netting. Now, within that netting, there is individual lives of a soul group per se, not necessarily that you are that person per se. It's as Charles Colston was saying, it's an aspect of your personality. My understanding was until that all fills up, then the true understanding of who you are as a person is relieved or revealed. I believe, tapping into source for the sense of reincarnation is everyone is a part of God. That is the aspect that is shared amongst us, that we're not necessarily reincarnated as the person themselves, but an aspect of, say, a grasp of sand is a part of another life that is shared, let's say, within stars. We're all made from stars and carbon. So that's my understanding, is within the aura, which I have seen within people's auras, different life within the squares that you could open up, see whoever it was. But as I say, it all comes back to collective energy. So it's tapping into the source. From my understanding is you pass over, you relive again. That is classified as reincarnation.
Okay, that's
my understanding.
Interesting point there. Tim, would you like to come forward? And then I'm going to take a couple more, and then I'm going to go back to our panel.
Good evening, David. Good evening, everybody. Very interesting subject. As a spiritualist all my life, I have actually really struggled with the reality of reincarnation up until less than a year ago, when a gentleman booked a trance sitting with me, and during the trance sitting asked a direct question to the guide. I believe my wife had several lives before she passed from this physical existence. Can you tell me of any of her previous lives? And at that point, Tim Abbott, the medium's going, oh my God, what's going on here? But I had to hold on to the discipline and the trance state and allow the guide to say and do whatever it was he felt he needed to express, and relayed a first and surname, a commercial building in Dublin in Ireland, and gave the full address of where the gentleman's wife had previously lived in a previous existence. He went away after the sitting. In my head, I'm thinking, I was aware of that. There's just no way that's going to be factual. Lack of trust maybe in my guide, but in that moment, 2 weeks later, phoned back and said, I've researched, very educated man. He's in the middle of writing a book, which is why he came for the sitting, part of research. Followed up the address and the name, which was all correct. Now, I'd love to know the panel's opinion. I'm not sitting here saying, oh, what a wonderful trance medium I was in that moment. That's not the point I'm making here. For me, the reality of that experience there for me, it can only be either I've been aware of something whilst in the trance state on a psychic level, my guide has, or my guide has picked up, if you like, from an aura reading, if you like, something within the client's auric field. So I still struggle with the reality of reincarnation, although I've most recently had that experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. I'm going to take Leah, and then I'm going to go back to the panel. Leah.
Hello, sorry, it took me a second.
You loud and
You can hear me now, yeah, okay. I just want to thank you very much for being able to join tonight and to try my best English. What Charles said, I have to say it's something that reminded what my guide showed me years before I knew anything about spiritualism. Because through healing, I had a lot of people in contact with past life, as you call regression sittings or something like this. And it bothered me, it hurt, because I had the same questions like Stephen Upton, if I may say. What's the use of it? Yeah, because we have to live our life here. So, so more or less I asked Spirit World to show me what their opinion is. And they showed me something like, well, it was a picture trying to explain it to me. Yeah, they showed me something like a cube, like for our soul. And there were little branches going out on different times. Yeah. And there was images and different lights, sometimes at the same time and coming back. And the information I got was also that it's our soul's desire to grow, to be one with God again, to grow in experience, and to choose or to choose not to be in a life. So I don't know the answer, but I know for sure we have to find out why we're here. And if we have any kind of information, or for other people, it's not always important, is it a past life or memory? It's important what we do make out of it. And I thank you for your openness here.
Thank you very much, Leah. That's excellent. Those people that have got your hands up, please stay there. We will come back to you in a few moments. I'd like to come back to Charles. Charles, we've heard some different views there. Some people with direct experience that they're using as an evidence base to build their understanding on. What are your thoughts?
I was fascinated to hear all these points made. And, you know, if I can pick up one or two things Stephen said, I like Stephen, believe that it's not something fundamentally important that you need to know or go into what past lives you've had in order to live your life here and now. I sat with a medium once, and it was a trance talk with the actual guide through the medium. And I said to him, should I be interested in trying to find out if I've lived any previous lives? And he said, no. He said, it's no good looking over your shoulder what might have been in the past. You're here to live this life now. I mean, he was accepting that reincarnation was a fact, but he was saying it didn't matter. So I'm with Stephen on that particular point. Also, I would go along with Stephen in saying that reincarnation is not as compulsory as it may sound. Some of the early teachers seem to argue that you were on a wheel, or a wheel of rebirth, which you couldn't get off for a very long time. But a lot of the modern books coming out are painting the opposite picture. They're saying that reincarnation is a choice, and you do not have to come back unless you really feel you want to. Now, I shall just end by saying that apart from the fact that hundreds of guys were teaching this, the one thing that satisfied me about it, forget the evidence, the one thing that convinced me was the logic of it. Stephen mentioned about the fact that some people are born into life, into a life of ease, and others live a very poor life. And that made me think, you have a person who has a silver spoon, born with a silver spoon in his mouth. His parents are loving, they give him education, encouragement, give him access to all he needs to develop for the normal span of his life, 70 years and 10. You have a person, a child who is born into poverty, deprivation, squalor, possibly with uncaring or violently abusive, violently abusive parents. And worse still, and I think Stephen mentioned this, You can have a child who is so malformed that he cannot last more than a couple of hours in this world of matter. And you have to ask yourself, if each of those three types of lives were the only life they could live, then I would regard that as a lottery. It would be a cosmic joke. I cannot believe that the Great Spirit would operate a system of randomness like this, where everybody got one chance, and it was sheer randomness, like a lottery, as to whether you got a life of ease or you got a life of degradation. For me, the only explanation which made sense of all these lives was that they are all, each of them, one in a cycle of lives where everybody has to experience the whole range of experiences needed to eventually evolve. You can't expect a child which is going to pass into spirit again in 2 hours to cram into that tiny lifespan the amount of knowledge and evolution which is needed by a person with a normal lifespan. The only thing that explains it, in my opinion, is that everybody sees the extremes of all lives in a cycle. They all get to learn, they all get to experience the ups and the downs, the extremes of life from good to bad. And we all use those experiences, and they round out our evolution because we've been through everything and experienced everything. That to me makes it logically satisfying, where the single life hypothesis to me is it's bizarre. Voltaire said it is no more surprising to be born twice than to be born once. And he was so right. For me, the amazing thing would be to believe that you were only born once. That to me is bizarre.
Thank you, Charles. Brilliant. Can I bring Kevin in now, and then I'll come back to one of the other panel members. Kevin, what's your point, please?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Kevin.
Brilliant. I was a little bit like Charles when we was talking about silver birch. I believe that we were a facet where we are spread over, and each time that facet comes back into spirit, it brings back the wisdom and everything else that we lived. And reincarnation was a bit of a touchy subject. But then my parents had an experience with a well-documented case called the Pollock twins up in Hexham. And just to give you a brief story, these girls was going to school and got knocked over and killed. And within 12 months, her mother got pregnant. The father had a vision that there was going to be twins. The doctors in the hospital said no. When she went into labor, twins were born. And in them twins, their birthmarks was exactly in the shape of scars that was on these two girls that had passed. Now, we were saying that I believe that the facets were different, but they all went to back to the same source. But in this case, the girls started showing things that was common to the previous two girls, mannerism, how they knew things. And the thing was, the parents actually caught them in the playroom describing how they died, exactly where the blood was coming from when they got knocked over. And they even said the names of the toys and everything. So it changed my mind that maybe the same soul can come back if need be. And I don't know what the panel thought of that.
Jack, would you like to comment on that, please?
I've heard that story, Kevin, because it's from my neck of the woods, really. But to be truthfully honest, I can't give you an explanation for it. It is not my field. All I will say is that there is so much we do not know rather than what we do know. So we don't know, again, the extent of how the spirit world can influence us without it being a past life. But it's not my area, so I don't know. It's the same with the question that Tim put forward. Again, we can all guess at what that could be. So my opinion would be, if that man was an author and he was coming to test the medium so that then he could add more to his book? Was there a reason why he wanted to know about his wife and past lives? For me, it's the reasoning behind it. I don't have the answers, I'm afraid. Maybe Charles will, but all I will say is that I'm open to be convinced, but the spirit world are greater than we imagine, I would say.
Julie, would you like to come in and make your point?
Hi, thank you, David.
Hi, Julie.
Yeah, hi, how are you? Yeah, I would be very much, I would be in Stephen's camp there. I would very much agree with what he has said. For a long time, I didn't believe in past lives, but the last few years, and certainly since I've got more and more into spiritualism and got more and more communicating with spirit, and my son, I had my son very late in life, and it certainly is my son, although I had my own experiences, but certainly the experiences I've had with my son that have certainly made me realize I definitely know and I absolutely do believe in reincarnation. I'll just give you an example. My son is 16 now, but when he was born in 2004, from the moment he was born, he hated loud noise, and he was the only child in the ward that wasn't screaming. He was very passive, but if there was a noise or if the door banged, he would jump, and he was like that for quite a long time. And even when he was up to 2 or 3 years of age, he hated music and he hated loud music, and he'd always put his hands on his ears. And I remember when he was 12, he said to me, because I've always been interested in dreams as well, and he said, "Mommy, I had this strange dream," and he said it to me twice over a period of about 3 weeks, where he said and he hates the dark as well. That's another thing, but he said he could hear these noises and he could hear gunshot going off. And I was talking to him anyway, and I didn't influence him in any way. I allowed him to speak because I don't want to influence him in any way. But I do believe that it would have been, he was talking about a past life as a soldier reincarnated in one of the world wars. And I remember when I met my husband as well, myself and my husband, where it was a blind date that we met on, but we spoke to one another on the phone before we actually met in the physical. And it's funny, we both said it at other times. I heard his voice on the phone, and it was immediately when I heard his voice that there's something just triggered when I heard him speaking to me. And he said the same. When he heard my voice, I said hello to him, and he said it was my voice that he liked. So I really do believe that we do reincarnate. I certainly think it's horrific to think it's like a revolving door. So I don't believe in that. I believe we come back if we want to come back, and it could be 200 or 300 years. There could be a gap like that. But I also believe, as Stephen has said, that it's very important that so many people are interested in past lives, but what Spiritism has taught me is that it's so important to relive this life. And I've had glimpses of past lives. Some have been glamorous, I've been wealthy, some have been very poor. I have an image. I hate a porridge pot. Ever since I was a child, I wouldn't touch a pot. My mother had the porridge pot in the sink, and I wouldn't go near it. So that has something I know also to do with a past life. But I believe that's important to live now in this life, that this is the only life we have. It doesn't matter about the past. The future hasn't come yet. And Spiritualism teaches us how important it is to live a good life in this life. And so that's my feeling on it. I feel we shouldn't get too caught up with it. I'm certainly not going to be spending a load of money asking to be regressed, but I respect other people's decisions if that's what they do. Thank you, Stephen.
I need to press on because there's many people still waiting to speak. Can we come to Anne's iPad, please? Hi, Anne. Welcome. Would you like to come into the room and come and give us your point of view? If you just unmute yourself, you've muted yourself. That's it.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Hello from Switzerland. Thank you very much. I have been quite shattered because I had flashes of ancient lives. And my first one was when I was 18. And the one I had was, I had 4 or 5 flash, and it just happened like that. I'm just walking, I'm just doing normal life. And then I have something coming, just, I'm like pushed in another life, and it goes for a couple of seconds. And I see things and I know things, and it has been really, really difficult for me to live these things when I was younger. And so for me, I'm sure I lived other lives. And I had the experience of having a friend who was a master's degree in history. And for example, one of the life I saw, he told me it was this Sichan, I don't know if I pronounce it well, but I had absolutely no idea. And from what I was talking and I was telling I saw in my life, my previous life, he said, well, this is the bracelet you saw, this is, and I was amazed. And I said, wow, yes, that's it. So for me, there's a proof, you know, but I don't know why I had these flashes. I never had anybody who had the same than me. So I was just hoping somebody had the same experience, but there's a common thread in it. So the common thread in all these lives, you know, now I'm 64, so I'm not 18 anymore, is that I was there to help people. I was there to just do the best I can to just help my fellow people in healing and helping, and now it's mediumship. So I think there's sort of common thread. That's all I can say, but that's it.
And do you think those flashes, those insights you had to another existence have helped you bring you to where you are today? Just give me
yes. Yes.
Okay, thank
Definitely.
you.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about the time. Would you like to quickly take a couple of selections from the chat box, and then I'm going to ask Stephen to round things up.
I'd actually like to come back, David, if you don't mind, on a gentleman raised earlier about the Pollock twins.
Yes.
And I'd like to respond to that, actually.
Okay.
We've had another explanation, actually. If you read about the Pollock twin case, it can sound very convincing. However, I knew them. I met them. Not only met the Pollock twins, I met their brother, I met the father, the whole family. I stayed with them for a few days. It was back in July of 1979. And I believe at the time they were living in Scarborough, if memory serves me correctly. But I went and stayed with them. And I'm trying to be very careful what I say, because I don't want to be unkind to them, because this is purely a personal opinion, that I'm not sure that the way things were published are exactly as I remember being told, or talking to the actual people involved at the time, that I necessarily accepted the entire truth behind that story from having met them personally and stayed with them as a family. So it is another explanation that what we read in books can be very interesting and can be convincing, but isn't necessarily exactly what happened. It's what's been reported to have happened, sometimes not firsthand, and sometimes even if it's firsthand, it's not always exactly, I suppose the truth is what I'm trying to say, without wishing to sound insulting to the family in any way. So having met them, my recollections of meeting them came out differently from what I've seen that are published about it.
Okay, Steve, an interesting point there. And certainly that's true of the birth of modern spiritualism. Look at the story of Hydesville and the way that's been misrepresented and misreported. Alf, can I ask you to, if there's anything in the chat box that you really feel we need to share?
No, I don't think there is. Lots of great comments from people. Obviously, people are very researched in this area and in this field. What I will do, I will take some of them and we'll add them to the recording of this session so that people can see them again. So if you don't get a chance to read them now, watch the recording again. You can watch them again.
I'm going to ask Lawrence, please, to just come in. If you can make your point very quickly, and then we've got Sarah and Mark, and then I'm going to have to call it a night because we've run out of time. So Lawrence, welcome. if you can unmute yourself.
I have indeed. Good evening. Thank you. Just my thoughts on this. My personal feelings are we tend to humanize our thoughts, dealings and actions with Spirit and Eternal Father, etc. Because I keep hearing with the reincarnation, and it is always a prevalent question being asked time and time and time again, I was this, I was that, retaining my identity. I don't think that I will retain my whole identity when I go to Spirit. My thoughts and my question would be, could it be part of, say, a soul group's memories coming through? So it wasn't actually I was this person, but I am part of that collective consciousness or that collective understanding that experienced that at that time.
That's an interesting point, Lawrence. Thank you very much for making that. And sorry we don't have more time to explore that. Sarah and Mark, I'm going to give you the closing question. Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much for the talk. Very interesting. What interests me is that there are many subjective discussions about what we believe and what we don't believe in respect of reincarnation. And it's easy to get lost on the whys and wherefores of of how it happens and why it happens. But I haven't heard much tonight about the sort of scientific evidence behind whether this happens or not. And my point originally was going to be a question to the panel. What are their thoughts on that? Because I'm aware there's quite a lot of work done by the University of Virginia in America, particularly by a guy called Jim Tucker, who talks about this and have quite a broad background of documented case reports that they studied in detail. And really my question was what did the panel want to comment on that? Because the issue is about, does it really happen? And then you can start asking the questions of what's it about?
Okay, Charles, can I give you the closing comments, if I may?
Now, is that a comment on the last speaker or just a general closing comment?
Comments on the last speaker and then wrap us up.
There is an awful lot, I think, on the scientific side, which would help to strengthen the case for reincarnation. There's too much to mention now, but you had Dr. Ian Stevenson in America, who published this book about 1,600 cases suggestive of reincarnation, and he did it using scientific method. It isn't always easy to apply scientific method to these sort of concepts, but he managed to produce a very authoritative and scholarly work, which laid the foundations for many people to believe that there was something in this. And then you've got scientific research into out-of-the-body experiences, communication from spirit, which impinge upon reincarnation and so on. We haven't time to go into them, obviously, but a lot of scientific work is being done like this. But I come back to the general point I made, that a previous speaker talked about, is it tapping into cosmic consciousness? And I have to say, like Silver Birch, that a lot of this can be explained away. So oddly enough, although I accept reincarnation, and I am a loyal SNU member, I think the union is right to sit on the fence. To me, this is a private belief. I don't think it impinges upon the way we live our lives specifically, though I think a knowledge of reincarnation, if you accept it, can help you in your outlook on life. If you know that there's a sort of balance and equilibrium that operates by natural law, you won't be too worried or get down when things seem to go against you. You'll know there's a balance operating, because that's part of what reincarnation teaches, the law of equilibrium and balance. But ultimately, I don't expect the union to ever come on one side or the other. I don't think it's the sort of thing they can pronounce on. I say again, there's plenty of evidence, but I don't think there's proof. It will ultimately come to what you yourself as a person accept Has your standard of evidence sufficient to convince you? It has convinced me, but I'm very open-minded about how it works. And I think the important thing, I think, for everybody here is to be open-minded about it.
Thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, the hour disappeared as quickly as I expected it would. It's been a fascinating evening. I'd like to thank my guests, Minister Jackie Wright, Minister Stephen Upton, Charles Colston, for joining us this evening and helping us to have this discussion. I think we could talk for many, many weeks or years and perhaps still not create a definitive opinion. But to me, that is one of the most wonderful things about spiritualism. It affords us the opportunity to be able to think for ourselves, to reason for ourselves, and to draw our own conclusions without dictating to us exactly what we need to think and feel. This evening is going to be our last evening for a couple of weeks. We're going to take a break. We will be back. I think it's fairly a good chance we'll be bringing reincarnation back onto the agenda at some future point. I think tonight we've only scratched the surface. Thank you for supporting us. We've had our biggest audience tonight of this particular run, and I hope that you found the evening's conversation thought-provoking. You may not have agreed with everything that's been said, but hopefully, as a good spiritualist, you're prepared to consider some of the ideas, the arguments, the theories that we've shared tonight. Can I wish you all a very happy new year, and let's hope and pray that 2021 is a little better than 2020 has been for all of us. Good night and God bless, and I'll hang back to Charles. Thank you. Sorry, to Alf. Sorry, Alf.
Well, well, I'm sure we will come back to the subject of reincarnation. Who would have thought that? Reincarnation coming back. If you want to, if you're watching the recording of this session, and hang on for a few moments and I will put up the comments that came up in the chat box, because I think that's an important part of these sessions and an important part of the discussion, and I want to capture those and not lose them. Thank you, David. Thank you to the panel. Thank you to everyone in the audience for making this a great session. If you want to keep up with things that are happening in the Union, please visit our website, which is snu.org.uk. Our social media channels on Facebook, which is at the Spiritualist National Union, and Instagram and Twitter. You'll find us by using at Spiritualist SNU. And you can also find recordings of other audiences with the President on our YouTube channel, which is SNU Film. Thanks for a great evening, everyone, and Happy New Year. And we'll look forward to seeing you in 2021. God bless.